The galaxy was old. Very old. 12 great species had ruled the stars for millions of years before humans even learned to make fire. They called themselves the Galactic Concord, and they believed they knew everything about peace and war and the proper way to run a civilization. Then they found Earth. The Qureshi were the first to make contact. They were tall beings with silver skin and 4 arms, and they had watched human television broadcasts for 50 years before deciding to say hello. What they saw in those broadcasts frightened them. Humans fought wars over land. They fought wars over ideas. They fought wars over things as small as words, spoken by men who died hundreds of years ago. The Qureshi saw a species that had split the atom and immediately used it to burn 2 cities full of innocent people. They are dangerous, the Qureshi ambassador told the Concord. But they are also young. Perhaps we can guide them. The Concord agreed to welcome humanity into galactic society. But they also agreed on something else. Humans would never be allowed to build warships. Not ever. Not until they proved they could be trusted with such power. The Treaty of Integration was signed 50 years ago. Humanity could explore the stars. They could build colonies on distant worlds. They could trade with any species that wanted to trade with them. But every human ship had to be a civilian ship. No weapons beyond basic defense systems. No military vessels of any kind. The Concord sent inspectors every 3 months to make sure humans followed the rules. They scanned every ship, every station, every factory. They looked for hidden weapons and secret research. They never found anything wrong. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood at the window of Meridian Station and watched a Qureshi dreadnought pass by. The alien warship was beautiful in a terrible way. Its hull was covered with weapons that could crack a planet in half. Humans were not allowed to build such things. Tanaka was 63 years old. She had spent her whole life in space, commanding ships that carried cargo and diplomats and scientists. Never soldiers. Never weapons. The treaty did not allow it. Her aide, Commander Marcus Webb, walked up behind her. He was a young man with dark hair and serious eyes. He held a computer pad in his hands. "The inspection is complete, Admiral," he said. "We passed." Again. "Of course we did." Tanaka did not turn from the window. "We always pass." Webb stood beside her and looked at the Qureshi dreadnought. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like? To command a real warship?" Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. "Every day," she finally said. Every single day. She had been a young officer when the treaty was signed. She remembered the anger and the shame. Humanity had reached the stars only to be told they were too dangerous to be trusted, too violent, too savage. They were children in the eyes of the elder races, and children were not given weapons. But Tanaka also remembered something else. She remembered the look in her grandfather's eyes when he told her stories about the old wars on Earth. He had been a soldier once, before the aliens came. He had seen what humans could do when they had no choice but to fight. "The Concord thinks they know us," her grandfather had said. "They think they understand what we are, but they have never seen us when our backs are against the wall. They have never seen us when everything we love is about to be taken away." Tanaka had never forgotten those words. 20 years ago, she had been promoted to admiral. It was a strange title for someone who commanded cargo ships, but the human government wanted to give their people hope. They wanted to show that humanity still had pride, even if they had no warships. That same year, Tanaka had received a secret message from the President of the United Earth Government. The message contained only 2 words: Project Prometheus. She had spent the next 20 years building something the Concord never expected, something that followed every rule of the treaty while breaking its spirit completely. The Concord had forbidden humans to build warships. Fine. Humans would not build warships. They would build something else instead. Every human ship in the galaxy had a secret. The cargo haulers had hulls made of adaptive armor that could stop plasma fire. The medical frigates had lasers powerful enough to cut through enemy shields. The mining vessels had engines fast enough to outrun any destroyer in the Concord fleet. None of these things were weapons. Not officially. The armor was for protection against asteroid impacts. The lasers were for emergency surgery in deep space. The engines were for rapid evacuation during mining accidents. The Concord inspectors looked at these things and saw nothing wrong. They were looking for missiles and torpedoes and warship designs. They were not looking for civilian technology that happened to have military applications. Tanaka smiled at her own reflection in the window. The Concord thought humans were following the rules. They thought humanity had accepted its place as a lesser species, forever dependent on alien protection. They were wrong. 12,000 human ships flew through the galaxy. Every single one of them could be turned into a weapon within hours. Every single one of them carried hidden systems that the Concord had never noticed. Every single one of them was waiting for a signal. Commander Webb was still looking at the Kireshi dreadnought. "Sir, do you think we will ever need it? The project, I mean. Do you think we will ever have to fight?" Tanaka watched the alien ship disappear into the darkness of space. "I hope not," she said. "But hope is not a strategy. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Commander. The Concord protects us now. But what happens when they decide we are not worth protecting? What happens when something comes along that frightens even them?" She turned away from the window and walked toward the door. "We must be ready. Not because we want war, but because we want to survive. The Concord gave us peace, but they also gave us chains. One day, those chains might break. And when that day comes, humanity must be able to stand on its own." Webb followed her out of the observation room. The other species would never understand. They would see it as a betrayal. "Yes," Tanaka agreed. "They would. But I would rather be alive and distrusted than dead and respected." She paused at the door and looked back at the stars. "The universe does not care about treaties, Commander. It does not care about rules. It only cares about one thing: survival. And humans have always been very good at surviving." She walked away, leaving Webb alone with the stars and the distant lights of alien ships. Somewhere out there, 12,000 human vessels went about their daily business. Mining asteroids, carrying cargo, healing the sick, and waiting. Always waiting. The fire of Prometheus burned in secret, hidden inside every ship humanity had ever built. One day, the galaxy would see that fire for what it truly was. But not today. Today, humanity was patient. Today, humanity followed the rules. Tomorrow might be different. The asteroid belt of Tau Ceti IV was a lonely place. Millions of rocks floated in the darkness, some as small as houses and others as big as mountains. Mining companies had worked here for decades, pulling iron and gold and rare metals from the ancient stones. The ship called Prometheus looked like any other mining vessel. It was big and ugly and covered with drilling equipment. Its hull was scarred from years of hard work in the asteroid fields. No one would look at it twice. But Dr. Elena Vasquez knew the truth. She floated through the ship's main corridor, pulling herself along the guide rails in the zero gravity. The walls around her hummed with hidden power. This was not just a mining ship. This was the heart of humanity's secret hope. Chief Engineer Kofi Mensah was waiting for her in the main engineering bay. He was a big man with dark skin and gentle eyes, but his hands were the hands of a genius. He had spent 15 years building things that should not exist. "The new armor plating is working perfectly," Kofi said. He pointed to a display screen that showed the ship's hull. "It looks like standard mining protection, but it can stop plasma fire from a Kireshi destroyer." Elena smiled. "And the weapons?" Kofi led her to another part of the engineering bay. Here, massive machines sat in rows like sleeping giants. "Mining lasers," he said. "At least, that is what the registration documents say. In reality, they can punch through 3 meters of warship armor." Elena touched one of the machines. It was cold and smooth under her fingers. "How many ships have we converted now?" 412 are fully ready. Another 200 are still being modified, but the real number is much bigger. Kofi pulled up a new display. "We have sent firmware updates to every human ship in the galaxy. 12,000 vessels can receive combat programming within 6 hours of the signal. 12,000 ships." Elena let the number sink into her mind. When Project Prometheus had started 20 years ago, she had been a young scientist with a crazy idea. Now that idea had grown into something that could change the galaxy. "Show me the bridge," she said. They floated through the ship until they reached the command center. It looked like a normal mining ship bridge, with displays showing asteroid positions and drilling schedules. But Elena knew that every screen could switch to combat mode with a single command. Every console hid weapons controls underneath its civilian surface. Captain David Chen was sitting in the command chair. He was a quiet man who had spent 20 years pretending to be a simple miner. In truth, he was one of the best tactical minds humanity had ever produced. "Dr. Vasquez," he said, standing to greet her. "Welcome aboard. Again." Elena shook his hand. How are the crew? Ready. They have been ready for years. Chen looked around at his bridge crew. Men and women who looked like ordinary workers but trained like soldiers in secret. We all know why we are here. We all know what we are waiting for. And you understand that we might never be needed? Elena asked. The Concorde might protect us forever. We might live our whole lives without ever using what we have built. Chen nodded slowly. I understand. But I also remember what my grandmother told me when I was young. She survived the last war on Earth. She told me that peace is not something you hope for. It is something you prepare for. The strong make peace because they can also make war. Elena understood. Every person involved in Project Prometheus understood. They were not building weapons because they wanted to fight. They were building weapons because they wanted to live. She spent the next 3 hours inspecting every system on the ship. The torpedo bays were disguised as cargo holds. The shield generators were hidden inside the water recycling equipment. The combat sensors were built into the mining survey systems. Everything was perfect. Everything was invisible to Concorde inspectors. Everything was ready. There is something else I want to show you, Kofi said as they finished the tour. He led her to a small room near the back of the ship. Inside, a single console glowed with soft blue light. This is the command relay, he explained. When Admiral Tanaka sends the Prometheus signal, every human ship in the galaxy will receive it through systems like this one. Within seconds, the entire merchant fleet will know that the time has come. Elena stared at the console. Such a small thing. Such a simple piece of technology. And yet it connected humanity like nothing else ever had. The Concorde has no idea, she whispered. No, Kofi agreed. They look at us and see cargo ships and mining vessels and medical frigates. They see a species that follows rules and causes no trouble. They do not see what is hidden underneath. Elena thought about the alien inspectors who visited human ships every 3 months. They were so careful. They checked everything. They scanned for weapons and military technology with machines that could detect a single molecule of explosive material. But they were looking for the wrong things. They expected humans to break the rules in obvious ways. They expected hidden missiles and secret warship factories. They never imagined that humans would turn every civilian tool into a weapon. Mining lasers could cut through enemy hulls. Medical nanobots could eat through armor. Agricultural pest control systems could burn through shields. Emergency evacuation engines could outrun any warship ever built. None of it was illegal. All of it was deadly. We are ready, Elena said. After 20 years of work, we are finally ready. Kofi nodded. Now we wait. Yes, now we wait. They left the command relay room and returned to the main corridor. Through a window, Elena could see the asteroids floating in the darkness. Somewhere beyond those rocks, Concorde patrols flew past without any idea of what was hiding so close to them. Elena had given her whole life to this project. She had sacrificed marriage and children and normal happiness so that humanity could have a future. Sometimes, late at night, she wondered if it was worth it. Sometimes she wondered if she was crazy, but then she remembered why she had started. She remembered the day the Concorde announced that humans would never be allowed to build warships. She remembered the shame in her father's eyes. She remembered the way the alien ambassadors had smiled, so sure that they were doing the right thing. They thought they were protecting the galaxy from human violence. They thought they were teaching a young species to be peaceful. But all they had really done was force humanity to become clever. All they had really done was make humans hide their strength instead of showing it. One day, the galaxy would learn the truth. One day, something would happen that forced humanity to reveal what it had built. Elena did not know when that day would come, but she knew it would come eventually. And when it did, the Concorde would finally understand. Humans were not children to be controlled. They were not savages to be feared. They were survivors. They had always been survivors. The Prometheus floated silently among the asteroids, looking like just another mining ship, but inside its ugly hull, the fire of human defiance burned bright. Waiting, always waiting. Ready for the day when waiting would finally end. They came from the darkness between galaxies. No one knew where they started or how long they had been traveling. The first reports called them the Vethkai, a name taken from an ancient Kirishi word that meant the hunger that never ends. They were insects, or at least, they looked like insects. Each one was the size of a human hand, with 6 legs and sharp jaws and eyes that saw only food. Alone, A single Vethkai was nothing, but they never traveled alone. They moved in swarms of billions. Their ships were not built from metal but grown from living tissue. Each bioship was like a giant hive, carrying millions of the creatures inside its organic walls. And they were always hungry, always searching for new worlds to consume. 17 civilizations had fallen to the Vethkai before they reached conquered space. 17 species had been eaten down to the last child. Their planets were left as dead rocks, stripped of all life, all resources, all hope. Now the swarm had arrived at the edge of the galaxy. And for the first time in a million years, the great species of the Concord were afraid. Admiral Tanaka watched the emergency meeting of the Galactic Concord on her display screen. The ambassadors of 12 species sat in a great circular chamber, their faces showing emotions that ranged from fear to despair. Ambassador Velthari of the Kireshi stood at the center. His silver skin looked pale, and his 4 hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "The Third Fleet is gone," he said. 40 dreadnoughts, the pride of the Concord Navy, destroyed in less than 6 hours. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. The Third Fleet had been the strongest military force in the galaxy. It had protected the Concord for thousands of years. And now, it was gone. "The Vethkai have taken the Meridian sector," Velthari continued. "They are consuming every world in their path. Our analysts estimate that they will reach the core systems in 4 months. Another ambassador, a being made of living crystal called Shard of Morning, spoke next. "What is our plan? How do we stop them?" Velthari's face showed no hope. "We are pulling back all military forces to defend the core worlds. The inner systems must be protected at all costs. Everything else." He paused. "Everything else must be sacrificed." Tanaka felt her blood turn cold. She knew what everything else meant. "What about the outer colonies?" Shard of Morning asked. "What about the human settlements in the Tau Ceti cluster?" Velthari did not answer right away. That silence told Tanaka everything she needed to know. "We cannot defend everywhere." The Kireshi ambassador finally said, "We must make hard choices for the greater good. The human colonies are too far from the core systems. By the time the Vethkai reach them, our remaining fleets must be in position to defend more important targets." More important targets? Tanaka turned off the display before she threw something at it. To the Concord, human lives were less important than alien worlds. Human colonies were acceptable losses in a war for survival. Commander Webb stood nearby, his face pale with shock. "They are abandoning us," he said. "After 50 years of telling us they would protect us, they are just leaving us to die." Tanaka stood very still. She had always known this day might come. She had spent 20 years preparing for it, but now that it was here, she felt a strange mix of anger and calm. "How long until the Vethkai reach Tau Ceti?" she asked. Webb checked his computer pad. 3 weeks, maybe 4 if we are lucky. 3 weeks. 8 million humans lived in the Tau Ceti cluster. Men, women, children. Families who had left Earth to build new lives among the stars. And the Concord had decided they were not worth saving. "Send a message to the president," Tanaka said. Her voice was steady, but her heart was racing. "Tell him the time has come. Tell him Project Prometheus is active." Webb stared at her. "Admiral, are you sure? If we reveal ourselves now, the Concord will know everything. They will never trust us again. If we do not reveal ourselves now, there will be no one left to trust." Tanaka walked to the command console of Meridian Station. "Send the signal, Commander. All channels. Authorization code Prometheus." Webb hesitated for only a moment. Then he entered the commands that humanity had been waiting to enter for 20 years. Across the galaxy, something changed. On 1,000 different worlds, human captains received a single encrypted message. They read it once, then deleted it. Then they began to wake their ships. Mining vessels powered up weapons that had never been fired. Medical frigates activated combat shields. Cargo haulers opened hidden torpedo bays. Agricultural ships switched their pest control systems to attack mode. 12,000 ships began to transform. Not into warships, humans had never built warships, but into something just as deadly. Something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain David Chen stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and watched his displays come alive with combat data. Around him, his crew moved with quiet purpose. They had trained for this moment in secret for years. Now the training was over. All systems green, his weapons officer reported. Mining lasers at full power. Shields at maximum. We are ready, Captain. Chen looked at the stars through his viewport. Somewhere out there, the Vethkai were coming. They had destroyed civilizations older than human history. They had eaten worlds that humans could not even imagine. But they had never fought humans. Signal the fleet, Chen said. Tell them we move in 12 hours. Tell them. He paused, searching for the right words. Tell them that today, we stop hiding. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity can do. The message went out to every human ship in the cluster. And one by one, 400 vessels answered. They came from asteroid mines and orbital stations and deep space outposts. They came from every corner of human space, gathering like a fist closing in the darkness. The Concord had abandoned them. The elder races had decided that humans were not worth saving. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Admiral Tanaka stood at the window of Meridian Station and watched the first human ships arrive. They were ugly and awkward. These converted miners and freighters. They looked nothing like the sleek warships of the Concord Navy. But they were here. They had answered the call. And they were ready to fight. We have 400 ships, Commander Webb reported. Against the Vethkai swarm. That is not much. No, Tanaka agreed. It is not much, but it is everything we have. She turned from the window and walked toward the shuttle bay. And sometimes, everything is enough. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin. The Vethkai swarm entered the Tau Ceti system on a Tuesday morning. 800 bioships emerged from faster-than-light travel like a plague, spreading across the stars. Each ship was a living nightmare, grown from flesh and bone and hunger. Together, they had destroyed civilizations that had lasted for millions of years. Their scouts had already scanned the system. They found only civilian ships and mining stations. No warships, no defenses. The humans who lived here had nowhere to run and nothing to fight with. The swarm did not slow down. Why should it? These were just more animals to be consumed, more food for the endless hunger. Then the mining ships opened fire. Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and watched the first volley strike the enemy fleet. 400 human vessels fired at the same moment, their hidden weapons finally revealed. Mining lasers cut through bioship hulls like knives through paper. Cargo torpedoes exploded against organic armor. Medical frigates unleashed surgical beams that burned through the enemy from the inside out. In the first 30 seconds, 20 Vethkai ships died. The swarm stopped advancing. For the first time in their long journey across the galaxy, the Vethkai felt something like surprise. These were not the defenseless prey they had expected. These were predators wearing the skin of sheep. All ships, spread formation, Tanaka commanded. Her voice was calm, but her heart was pounding. Do not let them surround us. Keep moving. Keep firing. The human fleet moved like nothing the Vethkai had ever seen. They did not fly in the careful formations of conquered warships. They flew like chaos itself, each captain making split-second decisions without waiting for orders. They darted between enemy vessels, firing from unexpected angles, retreating before the swarm could respond. The Concord had taught its officers to fight in ordered lines, to follow careful plans, to wait for commands from above. Humans fought differently. Humans fought like they had been fighting for their entire history with creativity, with desperation, with the wild courage of people who had nothing left to lose. Captain Chen pushed the Prometheus into the heart of the swarm. His mining lasers fired again and again, each shot finding a target. Around him, bioships tried to surround his vessel, but his engines were too fast. Every time they closed in, he slipped away. Missiles incoming, his weapons officer shouted. The Vethkai had recovered from their surprise. They were fighting back now. Deploy defensive nanobots, Chen ordered. The medical nanobots designed officially for surgery and healing flooded out from the ship's hull. They met the organic missiles in empty space and began to eat them from the inside out. The missiles fell apart before they could reach their targets. Hour after hour, the battle continued. The human fleet was smaller than the swarm, but they were faster and smarter. They used asteroids for cover. They pretended to retreat, then turned and attacked from behind. They sent fake signals to confuse enemy sensors. They fought dirty in ways the Vethkai had never experienced. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the battle from a command station deep inside the Prometheus. Her displays showed the position of every ship, the status of every weapon. She had spent 20 years building this technology. Now she watched it do exactly what it was designed to do. Enemy losses at 300 ships, her assistant reported. Human losses at 42. 42 ships. 42 crews. Thousands of people who would never go home. Elena felt the weight of each death like a stone in her chest. But the battle was being won. The Vethkai were confused. Their hive mind tried to adapt, but humans were too unpredictable. One moment they attacked in groups. The next moment they scattered in all directions. One moment they targeted the largest bioships. The next moment they focused on the smallest. There was no pattern, no logic that the swarm could understand. This was how humans had always fought. Not with perfect plans, but with constant change. Not with order, but with creativity. Every human captain was making their own decisions, following their own instincts, trusting their own judgment. The Vethkai had destroyed civilizations that fought in straight lines. They had never faced an enemy that changed direction every few seconds. Admiral Tanaka felt the tide turning. The swarm was pulling back, trying to regroup, but she did not let them rest. All ships, full advance, she ordered. Push them back. Do not give them time to think. The human fleet surged forward. Mining vessels that had spent years pretending to be harmless suddenly became the deadliest weapons in the system. Their lasers never stopped firing. Their torpedoes never stopped launching. Their crews never stopped fighting. 11 hours after the battle began, it was over. 600 Vethkai bioships drifted dead in space. Their organic hulls were torn open, their crews scattered in the void. The swarm that had destroyed 17 civilizations had been broken by 400 human mining ships. Humanity had lost 112 vessels. 30,000 people had died defending their homes. It was a terrible price, but it was a price worth paying. Admiral Tanaka stood at the viewport of the Prometheus and watched the wreckage of the enemy fleet. She was exhausted. Every bone in her body ached. But she was also proud. "Signal the remaining enemy ships," she said quietly. "Tell them they have 1 hour to retreat from this system. After that, we will hunt them down and destroy every single one." The message went out, and 40 minutes later, the remaining Vethkai ships fled into faster-than-light travel. They had never retreated before. They had never had to, but today, they learned what it felt like to lose. Commander Webb appeared at Tanaka's side. His uniform was dirty and his face was tired, but his eyes were bright with something like wonder. "We won," he said. "Admiral, we actually won." "Yes." Tanaka watched the last enemy ships disappear. "We did. The Concorde. They will have seen this. They will know what we built. Let them know." Tanaka turned away from the viewport. "Let them see that we are not helpless. Let them understand that humans do not need their protection." She walked through the ship, past crews who were too tired to celebrate but too proud to rest. Past medical bays filled with wounded soldiers. Past empty stations where people had died doing their duty. This was the cost of freedom. This was the price of survival. And humanity had paid it without asking for permission. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. The young species that had been forbidden to build warships had just done what no conquered fleet had ever done. They had stopped the Vethkai, they had broken the swarm, and they had done it with mining ships. Elena Vasquez found Tanaka in a quiet corridor near the engine room. The Admiral was sitting on a bench, staring at the wall with empty eyes. 30,000 people, Tanaka said softly. 30,000 people who trusted me to keep them alive. And 8 million who are still alive because of what you did. Elena sat down beside her. The Vethkai would have consumed everyone in this system. Every man, woman, and child. You stopped that. Tanaka was silent for a long moment. I know it was necessary. I know we had no choice. She looked at Elena with eyes that had seen too much. But I will carry those 30,000 names for the rest of my life. Every single one. Elena nodded. She understood. This was the burden of command. This was the weight that leaders had to carry. And Tanaka would carry it. Because that was who she was. The Concorde will want answers, Elena said. They will want to know how we did this. Then we will give them answers. Tanaka stood up slowly, but not the answers they expect. We followed their rules, Elena. Every ship out there is technically a civilian vessel. Every weapon is technically a civilian tool. We did exactly what they told us to do. She smiled a tired smile. We just did it better than they could ever imagine. 6 months passed after the Battle of Tau Ceti. The war against the Vethkai was over. The Concorde fleet had finally arrived to fight, using the time that humanity had bought with blood and sacrifice. Together, the combined forces of the galaxy had pushed the swarm back into the darkness between stars. But now came a different kind of battle. A battle of words instead of weapons. And Admiral Yuki Tanaka found herself standing in the great chamber of the Galactic Concorde, facing the judgment of 12 ancient species. The chamber was enormous. Its walls rose so high that they disappeared into shadow. 12 ambassadors sat in a circle around her, their alien faces showing emotions she could not always read. Some looked angry, some looked confused, and some looked at her with something that might have been respect. Ambassador Velthari of the Kirishi stood at the center. His silver skin was smooth, but his 4 hands were clasped tightly together. He was the one who would speak first. "Admiral Tanaka," he said. His voice echoed through the great chamber. "You stand before this council to answer for your actions. Humanity has violated the Treaty of Integration. You built weapons in secret. You hid military technology from our inspectors. You deceived us for 20 years. Tanaka stood straight and met his gaze. She wore her uniform without shame, the new symbol of the human defense force shining on her collar. She had nothing to hide anymore. "No," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "We did not violate the treaty. We never built a single warship. Every ship in our fleet is registered as a civilian vessel. Check your own records, if you do not believe me." Velthari's eyes narrowed. "You play word games with us. You know exactly what you did. Those mining lasers were not designed to cut rocks. Actually, they were." Tanaka allowed herself a small smile. "They cut rocks very well. They just happened to cut other things too." Another ambassador, Shard of Morning, the crystal being, spoke next. "This is not a matter for jokes, Admiral. You hid the truth from us. You pretended to be harmless while building an army in secret. How are we supposed to trust humanity after this?" Tanaka was quiet for a moment. She looked around at the 12 ambassadors, these beings who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. They had seen species rise and fall. They had watched civilizations turn to dust. And they had decided, 50 years ago, that humanity was too dangerous to be trusted with real power. "Let me tell you a story," Tanaka said. "When I was a young girl, my grandfather told me about the old wars on Earth. He told me about the times when humans fought each other over land and ideas and simple misunderstandings. He told me that we were a violent species, always ready to kill." She paused. The ambassadors watched her in silence, but he also told me something else. He told me that humans fight hardest when they are protecting the people they love. He told me that our violence is not random or cruel. It comes from the same place as our love. We fight because we care. We kill because we want to live. Tanaka walked forward, closer to the center of the chamber. "You looked at our history and saw only blood. You saw wars and weapons and death. And you decided that we could not be trusted. So you put us in chains. You told us we could never build warships. You sent your inspectors to watch us like criminals." Her voice grew stronger. "But you made a mistake. You thought those chains would make us weak. Instead, they made us clever. You thought you were teaching us peace. Instead, you taught us how to hide our strength." Ambassador Velthari opened his mouth to speak, but Tanaka continued. "We did not want to fight the Vethkai. We did not want to reveal what we had built. But when your fleets ran away, when you decided that our lives were not worth saving, we had no choice. We could die following your rules, or we could live by breaking them." She stopped in the very center of the chamber and looked at each ambassador in turn. "We chose to live, and in doing so, we saved 8 million human lives. We broke the swarm's advance for the first time in galactic history. We bought time for your fleets to regroup and win the war." Silence filled the chamber. The ambassadors looked at each other with uncertain eyes. They had expected an apology. They had expected fear. Instead, they found a woman who would not bend. "You ask how you can trust humanity," Tanaka said. "But that is the wrong question. The right question is, how can we trust you? You abandoned us. You left our colonies to die. When the moment of truth came, you chose to save yourselves instead of keeping your promises." Velthari's face showed something like shame. We had no choice. The core worlds had to be protected, and we had no choice either. Tanaka's voice was not angry. It was simply honest. We did what we had to do, just like you. The difference is that we are not ashamed of it. She stood tall, a small human woman in a chamber of ancient giants. But in that moment, she seemed larger than any of them. Here is what is going to happen, she said. Humanity will no longer accept the Treaty of Integration. We will build whatever ships we need to protect ourselves. We will create our own defense force, and we will take our place in this galaxy as equals, not as children. Shard of Morning spoke again. You cannot simply demand these things. The Concord has rules. We have. Your rules almost got 8 million people killed. Tanaka's voice cut like a blade. Your rules left us defenseless against an enemy that wanted to eat our children. So no, I do not care about your rules anymore. She walked toward the chamber's exit. You can accept us as partners, or you can try to stop us. But know this, every ship in the human fleet is still out there. Every captain who fought at Tau Ceti is still ready to fight again. And now the galaxy knows what we can do. She paused at the door and looked back. We do not want war with the Concord. We want peace. We want friendship. But we will never again be weak. We will never again depend on others to protect us. Those days are over. The debate lasted 3 more days after Tanaka left. The ambassadors argued and shouted and threatened. But in the end, they had no real choice. Humanity had proven itself in battle. Humanity had saved the outer colonies when no one else would. And humanity had done it all without technically breaking a single law. The new treaty was signed 1 month later. It recognized humanity's right to build military vessels. It gave humans a permanent seat on the Concord Security Council. And it acknowledged, for the first time, that the youngest species in the galaxy had earned its place among the stars. Admiral Tanaka returned to Meridian Station to find a message waiting for her. It was from Ambassador Velthari, and it contained only a few words. You were never as harmless as you seemed. I should have known. Well played, Admiral. Well played. She smiled and deleted the message. Then she walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were flying through the darkness. Real warships now, with real weapons, protecting real colonies. The chains were broken. The secret was revealed, and humanity was finally free. Dr. Elena Vasquez found her there an hour later. The scientist stood beside the Admiral in comfortable silence, watching the lights of distant ships. We did it, Elena said softly. After 20 years, we actually did it. Yes. Tanaka nodded. We did. Do you think they will ever really trust us? Tanaka thought about the question for a long moment. Maybe not. Maybe they will always be a little afraid of what we might do. But fear is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it is the only thing that keeps the peace. She turned to Elena with tired but satisfied eyes. We showed them something important. We showed them that humans cannot be controlled. We cannot be disarmed. Every tool we touch becomes a weapon, and every weapon we build serves a purpose. They tried to chain us, and we turned those chains into strength. Elena smiled. And now? Now we live. Tanaka looked back at the stars. We explore, we build, we grow. We make friends where we can and prepare for enemies where we must. We do what humans have always done. She placed her hand on the cold glass of the viewport. We survive. The stars burned bright and cold in the endless night. And among them, humanity took its first steps as a truly free species. They had been told they could not build warships. So they had not. They had built something better. They had built a civilization that would never be afraid again. And the galaxy was finally beginning to understand what that meant.